My name is Maya. I'm 28 years old and I live in Los Angeles, California. On the surface, I look like anyone else, at least until you notice the half-faded birthmark that stretches across my face. It's not just a small spot. It covers a good portion of my left cheek, running down toward my jawline, and it's been with me for as long as I can remember. People look at me differently because of it, and I've spent my life learning how to navigate those looks. Some people get uncomfortable, some people stare. Others can't hide their disgust, and I can feel it in their eyes, even when they try to pretend they're not looking. They call it imperfection, as if my face is some broken mirror they can't quite understand, as if it's something I need to apologize for. I was born this way, and yet it's been a constant fight to prove I deserve the same space in this world as anyone else. As a kid, I didn't fully understand what it meant. I didn't know why people stared or why they pulled their children away when I came too close. It wasn't until middle school that I realized how different I was from everyone else. It wasn't just my face. It was the way people treated me, as if I were some sort of oddity on display. In high school, I spent years hiding under layers of makeup, never showing anyone what was beneath. It was my secret, my shield, my way of blending in. I wanted to be seen, but I didn't want to be seen as the girl with the weird skin. I wanted to be invisible, to just pass through life unnoticed, without anyone making assumptions about who I was based on something I couldn't change. The truth is, that birthmark has always been more than just a mark on my skin. It's been a symbol of everything that has ever held me back. It's the first thing people notice about me, and it's the thing they can't seem to get past. It's a barrier I never asked for but have had to fight against every day of my life. As I got older, I started to believe I could escape it, that I could be someone else, someone who didn't stand out, someone who wasn't different. But no matter how hard I tried, it was always there, reminding me of what I could never outrun. When my inheritance came into question, I never expected the kind of battle it would turn into. I had always felt like an outsider in my own family. They were beautiful, flawless, with skin that shone like polished marble. I was the one who didn't belong, the one who couldn't quite match their standards. They never said it out loud, but I could feel it in every glance, every comment that was made about family aesthetics, as if being part of the family required fitting into a mold. I was never good enough to fit that mold. It was always clear to me that no matter what I achieved, no matter how hard I worked, I would never be the one who mattered in their eyes. It wasn't until that day, the day I stood outside the door of what I thought was supposed to be my home, that I finally realized what I had been missing. I had no idea what I was walking into when I arrived at that house, the one I had been told was mine. I had done everything by the book, followed every legal step to ensure my right to it. But when I arrived at the gates, they refused to let me in. They said I didn't fit their aesthetic. The words stung, but not as much as the realization that they had never truly seen me for who I was. They had seen the mark on my face, and that was enough to tell them I didn't belong. I stood there, my heart pounding, feeling the weight of all my insecurities and frustrations crashing down on me. It wasn't just about a house. It wasn't about the inheritance. It was about the years of being pushed aside, of being told I wasn't enough because of something I had no control over. But in that moment, something inside me snapped. I had played their game for too long, hidden behind my insecurities, let their judgments define me. Now, I wasn't going to let them dictate who I was any longer. I reached into my bag, pulled out the papers, the documents that proved the house was mine. I had waited for this moment, for the chance to finally show them who I really was, to prove that their superficial judgments couldn't stop me. With shaking hands, I handed them the papers. The look on their faces as they read them said everything. They had underestimated me. They had thought that my appearance, my birthmark, would be the thing that held me back. But it wasn't. I was done playing by their rules. And now it was my turn to show them what it really meant to belong. The moment I stepped onto the property, I knew something was off. It wasn't just the grandeur of the house, towering in front of me with its pristine white walls and perfectly manicured garden. No, it was the way everything felt too polished, too perfect, as if every corner of the place was designed to showcase wealth, status, and beauty, but not mine. I stood there, looking at the gates that I had expected to pass through easily, the place I thought was finally mine. But as I rang the bell and waited, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being judged before I even had a chance to step foot inside. I had always known that my appearance would be the first thing people noticed about me. It wasn't something I could change or hide, and over the years I had learned to ignore the whispers, the sideways glances. But it still stung every time. The mark on my face, that unmistakable birthmark stretched across half my cheek, was something people couldn't ignore. For most of my life, it had felt like an invisible barrier between me and everyone else. I wasn't just Maya. I was the girl with the mark, the girl who didn't quite fit. So when the gate opened and I saw their faces, I could already feel the judgment. The hesitation in their eyes told me everything I needed to know. They were expecting someone who fit into the perfect mold they had in their minds. Someone flawless. Someone beautiful. But not me. And when they looked at me, I saw the discomfort. The subtle recoiling. They didn't say anything, but their eyes gave them away. I wasn't what they had imagined. I wasn't what they thought they would see. I could feel their eyes darting to my face, to the mark, and then quickly away as if they were afraid of staring too long. It was like they couldn't get past it. As I walked inside, I felt every inch of my body tense. I couldn't help but wonder, was this how it would always be? Every time I tried to step into a space where I belonged, would I always be rejected? Because of something so trivial, so superficial, as the way I looked? They showed me around the house, talking about the amenities, the history, the value of the property, as if I wasn't even there. It was like I was invisible, just a shadow, trailing behind them as they moved through the rooms. I wasn't part of their world, and they were making that crystal clear. As we toured the house, I started to feel small, my every step measured and scrutinized. My skin burned with the weight of their stares, the looks they tried so hard to hide behind polite smiles and carefully constructed conversations. I was tired of it. I was tired of being in these spaces where I never belonged, where I had to work twice as hard just to be considered for something that should have been mine in the first place. As we approached the final room, the tension between us was palpable. The woman, one of the family's representatives, paused in the doorway and gave me a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We'll have to check with the others about the paperwork," she said in a tone that was just a little too sweet, just a little too dismissive. I could feel her words like a slap to the face. It wasn't just about the house. It was about what they saw when they looked at me. They saw someone who didn't belong, someone who didn't deserve to be there. The weight of their judgment pressed down on me, but something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to let them do this to me. I wasn't going to stand here and be treated like I didn't matter, like I wasn't worthy of a space that was rightfully mine. I had worked too hard for this, fought too many battles to get to this point, and I wasn't about to let them take it from me. I pulled the papers from my bag, my hands shaking but determined. The woman looked at me with a mix of surprise and irritation, but I didn't care. I didn't care what they thought of me anymore. I had come too far to let them push me aside. I placed the papers on the table in front of her, my heart pounding in my chest. For the first time in my life, I wasn't asking for permission. I wasn't begging to be seen. I was taking what was mine, and nothing was going to stop me. As she picked up the papers, her face slowly drained of color. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. The others in the room shifted uncomfortably, unable to ignore the truth staring them in the face. The house, the property, everything they thought was theirs. It was mine, and I wasn't leaving without it. They had underestimated me, just like everyone else always had. They had thought they could keep me out, that they could decide who was worthy of stepping into the world they had built. But they had forgotten one thing: I had a right to be there, and I wasn't going to let their prejudice stop me. For the first time, I saw the true power of what I had been hiding, my confidence, my strength, my ability to stand up for myself. They couldn't take that away. Not anymore. The moment was mine. I stood there waiting for them to say something. Anything. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating, like a heavy blanket pressing against my chest. The woman in front of me, the one who had looked at me with that polite smile just moments ago, was now staring at the papers in my hand as if they had burned her. The air in the room felt thick, and I could almost hear the sound of my heart pounding in my ears. I knew what was coming. I had seen it in their eyes, the disbelief, the discomfort, the hesitation. They weren't ready to accept that someone, like me, someone with my appearance, with my birthmark, could take something that they believed belonged to them. I had seen it before, the way people looked at me, the way they couldn't look past what they saw on the outside. It was always the same. They saw the mark on my face and thought they knew everything about me. They assumed I wasn't capable, that I didn't belong in the spaces they held so sacred. I had spent my whole life trying to prove them wrong, trying to show them that I was more than just my appearance. But in that moment, standing in the middle of that pristine, cold room, I felt like I had failed. They were looking at me like I was nothing more than a mistake. The realization settled in, slow and crushing. No matter how hard I tried, no matter how much I fought to be seen as more than just the girl with the mark, they would never see me that way. It didn't matter how many papers I showed them, how many facts I presented. They had already made up their minds about me. I was the outsider. I was the one who didn't belong. The room felt smaller and smaller with every passing second, and the weight of their judgment pressed down on me, suffocating me. I could feel the sting of their rejection, even though they hadn't said a word. Their eyes told me everything. I wasn't what they had expected. I wasn't what they wanted. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about everything I had ever fought for. The years of being pushed aside, the years of being overlooked, the years of trying to fit into a world that never wanted me. I had tried so hard to fight against it to show them that I could be just as good, just as worthy. But here I was, standing in front of them, and nothing had changed. Nothing was different. I felt like I had given everything I had, only to be met with the same rejection I had always faced. I wanted to scream, to tell them how wrong they were, to demand that they see me for who I really was. But the words wouldn't come. The weight of their disbelief was too heavy. I had spent so many years believing that if I just worked hard enough, if I just proved myself enough, they would eventually see me for who I truly was. But now, standing here, I realized it wasn't about what I did or how hard I tried. It was about them, about their inability to see past their own narrow view of the world. And I wasn't sure if I could keep fighting it. It felt like I was drowning in their expectations, in their perceptions of who I was supposed to be. The tears welled up in my eyes, but I forced them back. I couldn't let them see me break. Not now. Not when I had come this far. But inside, I was falling apart. I felt so small, so insignificant in that moment. All the years of fighting, of pushing through, felt like nothing. I had thought this house, this property, was going to be my victory, my way of finally proving that I was more than just the girl with the mark. But standing there, in that room filled with people who didn't see me, I realized that maybe I wasn't meant to win. Maybe this was the fight I was never going to win. Maybe I wasn't strong enough to change their minds, to change the world that had been built against me from the very beginning. I had put so much hope into this, so much belief that this time would be different, that this time I would finally get what I deserved. But now I wasn't sure if I could keep going. I wasn't sure if I had the strength to keep fighting for something that was never going to be mine. I stood there, still in the thick silence that seemed to fill the room, and tried to steady my breath. My hands were shaking slightly, but I refused to let them see how much I was struggling. They could feel the tension in the air, the way my presence made them uncomfortable, but they had no idea how much I had been carrying, how much I had been holding back for all these years. I had spent so long trying to be someone I wasn't, trying to fit into a world that didn't want me, a world that saw my birthmark as something I should hide, something that made me less than everyone else. And now, for the first time, I started to question everything I had ever believed about myself. The silence was almost unbearable, the kind of silence that settles in your chest and makes everything feel heavy. I had thought that showing them the papers, the proof that the house was mine, would be enough. I had thought that this time, things would be different. I had thought that if I just showed them the truth, they would have no choice but to accept. Me to accept that I belonged here. But it wasn't that simple. I had assumed that this house would be the validation I had been waiting for, that once I had it, I could finally stand tall, and they would have to see me for who I was. But now, all I felt was the weight of their rejection, the invisible barrier that I had been trying to break through my entire life. It wasn't just about this house anymore. It wasn't just about the inheritance or proving them wrong. It was about everything that had led me here. Everything that had shaped me into the person I was today. All the years of being made to feel like an outsider, like I wasn't enough, like I had to hide the most obvious part of myself just to fit in. The mark on my face had always been a part of me, but I had never been able to embrace it fully. It had always felt like a flaw, something I had to hide, something that made me different in a way I didn't want to be. I had spent years feeling less than, believing that I wasn't worthy because of how others saw me. But now, standing there, I was starting to realize that maybe the problem wasn't me. Maybe the problem was them. Maybe the way they saw me, the way they judged me, wasn't a reflection of who I truly was. It was a reflection of their own narrow-mindedness, their own inability to see beyond the surface. For so long, I had been trying to fit into their world, trying to conform to their standards of beauty, success, and worth. But what if I didn't need to? What if the truth was that I had been fighting the wrong battle all along? I had been so focused on proving myself to them, on trying to make them see me in a way that made them comfortable, that I had forgotten to see myself for who I truly was. I had always believed that I needed their approval to feel worthy, that their recognition was the thing that would finally make me whole. But now, as I stood there, feeling their judgment pressing down on me, I realized that it wasn't their approval I needed. It was my own. I had spent so long hiding from the world, from my own reflection, trying to be someone else, someone who was more acceptable, more like them. But maybe that was the mistake. Maybe I wasn't meant to fit into their mold. Maybe I was meant to create my own. The realization hit me hard, like a punch to the gut. I had been looking for validation from everyone except the one person who mattered most, myself. And now, as I stood there, facing the people who would never see me the way I wanted them to, I finally understood what I needed to do. I needed to stop trying to fit into their world. I needed to stop trying to be something I wasn't. I wasn't the girl with the birthmark. I was Maya, and I had the power to take control of my own life. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I didn't need this house to prove my worth. I didn't need their acceptance to feel validated. I had already proven to myself that I was strong enough to stand on my own, that I didn't need to be anyone other than who I was. It was a terrifying thought. For so long, I had lived in fear of being rejected, of being seen as less than. But now I was starting to see that I was never less than. I had always been enough. I had just been waiting for the courage to see it. The world had always told me I was flawed, that I was something to be fixed, something to be hidden. But I didn't need to hide anymore. I didn't need to fit into their world. I was creating my own. I knew it wouldn't be easy. I knew they would never accept me the way I wanted them to. But I also knew that I didn't need their acceptance to move forward. I had already done the hard work. Now it was time to take the next step. It was time to stop looking back. I could feel the change inside me as the weight of all those years of hiding, of pretending to be someone I wasn't, started to lift. The realization that I had been living for their approval, constantly searching for validation in the wrong places, was like a revelation. I had spent so long thinking that if I just showed them the right version of myself, the perfect version, they would finally accept me. But I had it all wrong. I had already been enough all along. It wasn't them. That needed to see me. It was me who needed to see myself. The house, the inheritance, it wasn't what I needed to prove my worth. I had spent so much energy fighting for a space that had always been mine, trying to force myself into their expectations of beauty and success. But now I knew I didn't need any of that. I didn't need their approval. The real power lay in owning my story, my identity, my place in the world. The papers they had once held in their hands were still there, untouched. But now, the significance of them had changed. They didn't define me anymore. They didn't hold the weight they once had. I had realized something far more important. What mattered was how I saw myself, not how they saw me. They had judged me based on my appearance, based on my birthmark, as if it defined me. But in truth, it never did. It was always just a small part of me, a surface detail that had no bearing on who I truly was. For the first time, I stood tall, and I realized that I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. It didn't matter that they couldn't see past my mark, my skin. What mattered was that I could. I could finally see myself for who I really was, strong, capable, worthy. I didn't need their acknowledgement or their acceptance to feel good about who I was. It was something I had to give. Myself. I had fought for so long to fit into their world, to mold myself into something they would accept, something they would admire. But now I understood that the world I had been trying to fit into wasn't mine to claim. It was theirs, and I had been bending myself into shapes I wasn't meant to take. The power I had been searching for wasn't in their eyes. It was in my own hands. It wasn't about winning them over anymore. It was about claiming what was mine, not because they said I could, but because I said I could. I didn't need to beg for their validation. I had already earned my place. I realized I didn't need to hold on to the idea of their approval. The house, the inheritance, those things didn't matter the way I thought they did. They were symbols of a life I no longer wanted to live. I wanted something bigger, something that was truly mine, not just something I could own. I wanted freedom. I wanted control. I wanted to make my own mark on the world. As I stood there, in that room, everything I had ever worked for took on a new meaning. I wasn't fighting for a house or a piece of paper. I was fighting for my right to exist in the world as I am, without apology, without needing anyone's permission to take up space. They had thought my birthmark made me less than. They had thought that I couldn't measure up, that I wasn't worthy of standing in their world. But they were wrong. I was more than my appearance. I was more than what they saw when they looked at me. The truth was, I was everything they couldn't see, everything they refused to acknowledge, and that was where my real power lay. For the first time, I felt the shift within me. It was a quiet revolution, but it was everything. The strength I had been searching for, the confidence I had been lacking, it wasn't out there, waiting for me to find it. It had always been inside me, waiting for me to realize it. I didn't need to ask for permission anymore. I didn't need to ask anyone to recognize my worth. I had already claimed it. The house, the inheritance, they didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that I was finally free. Free from their judgment. Free from their expectations. Free to live my life the way I always should have. And in that moment, I knew that no one could take that away from me. I was done waiting for someone else to see me. I had already seen myself, and that was more than enough. I stood in the quiet aftermath, surrounded by the weight of everything I had fought for. The papers lay on the table in front of me, the legal documents that proved my ownership, but they no longer felt like the victory I had once imagined they would be. The victory was not in the house, the money, or the property. It was in the silence that had filled the room when I handed them those papers. The way they had looked at me, their eyes no longer filled with judgment or disbelief, but with a grudging recognition. I had done it. I had taken control, not because they had given me permission, but because I had taken what was rightfully mine. There was no applause, no cheering, no dramatic confrontation. But there was something far more profound. There was respect. And more importantly, there was my own recognition of self-worth that I had been searching for my entire life. I realized then that all the battles I had fought in my life, against my own insecurities, against the judgment of others, against the belief that I wasn't enough, had been leading me to this moment. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong or gaining their approval. It was about proving to myself that I had the power to shape my own future. They could have their perfect lives, their perfect homes, their perfect skin. They could believe that the surface of things was the measure of a person's worth. But I didn't need any of that anymore. I had something far more valuable, the strength to stand on my own, to claim what I deserved without asking for their approval, and to walk away from the narrative they had tried to force upon me. The moment the house was officially mine, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't just the weight of ownership. It was the weight of all the years I had spent trying to prove myself, trying to make them see past my skin, past my appearance. I had done that. I had stopped looking to them to validate me, stopped waiting for their permission to exist in the spaces I wanted to inhabit. I was no longer the girl with the mark on her face. I was Maya, whole, complete, and strong. As I walked out of the room, the silence was no longer oppressive. It was liberating. I could feel the power I had been building inside myself for years finally coming to the surface. I had fought for my place, not in their world, but in my own, a world where I defined my worth. I wasn't just taking a house. I was taking my place in the world. And it wasn't just about property. It was about everything I had ever wanted: freedom, independence, and the right to be seen as I was. I no longer cared if they understood it. I no longer cared if they approved of me. I had already made peace with myself, and that was the greatest victory of all. No longer would I hide behind layers of insecurity or try to fit into a world that wasn't made for me. No longer would I let them dictate my story. I was the one holding the pen now. I could feel their eyes on me as I left the house, but I didn't feel small anymore. I didn't feel like I had to shrink myself to fit into their mold. I was walking away not just with the house, but with my own sense of power, my own sense of self. And that was all I had ever really wanted: to be seen, to be heard, to take up space in the world without apology. I had won, not because of the property, but because I had found the strength to claim what was always mine, to step into my life and embrace the person I had always been, regardless of the way others saw me. No one could take that away from me now. The victory was mine.